Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, here to bring you our Falcons vs. Saints Week 10 game preview. Atlanta is going on the road to New Orleans this time to try to complete their first sweep of the Saints in recent memory. And it's an exciting game. The Saints, of course, just fired head coach Dennis Allen a few days ago. And I know that team looks dysfunctional as hell, and they are. Don't get me wrong, but this team is going to give Atlanta their best shot. I guarantee you, they will be playing. This is probably the Saints Super Bowl, and we've seen the Falcons play like this, right, against the Saints in the past when the Falcons really haven't had much to play for. This is a big game for them. They're going to come out firing. Yes, that team is probably, from a talent perspective at this point, clearly not as good as Atlanta, but I mean, you can't underestimate the emotional toll this game is going to take and how important this is to that team coming off the firing of their head coach and really just trying to stick it to Atlanta as like their last gasp this year. So this is a big game, an important game. Obviously, it is a division game. It's a big deal for Atlanta in that regard. Obviously, not too worried about the Saints coming up and taking control of the division, but Atlanta needs to stack as many wins as they can to get as big of a gulf over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as possible. Tampa Bay does it to play the 49ers this week, so you hope if the Falcons can get this win and the Bucs do lose to the 49ers, the Falcons will have effectively a 4-game lead over Tampa Bay with only 7 games to go. And the Bucs' remaining schedule is pretty easy. So you're not, they could go on a big run and win most of those final games, but Atlanta also has a fairly easy schedule. Definitely a couple of challenging games in there, but with that 4-game lead, there's not a lot. Even if the Falcons lose a couple of these games, it's not going to be enough for the Bucs to close the gap. So Atlanta in a good position here, and this game would certainly help them get an even bigger lead in the division. And potentially close this one out without too much trouble. But first of all, you got to win the game. We're going to take a closer look at how Atlanta and New Orleans match up. Definitely some changes to the way these two teams look since these guys played all the way back in week 4. It's been an early division slate for the Falcons. This will be their 5th of 6 division games already before week 11. So one of the earliest starts and near finishes to the division that the Falcons have had in many, many years. So far, Falcons unbeaten, of course, 4-0 division record. So we'll see how this one plays out. This is going to be a fascinating game to see if the Falcons can weather the storm of a team that's kind of going to put it all out there and really try to stick it to them. Can they weather that storm, get the win they desperately need to get, and really just put their rival in the dirt the way that I think they really want to and should do this week. I think this is a big game to see just how this team can play in a big game, even when it's an inferior quote unquote opponent on paper. Can you avoid the letdown, avoid getting beat by a team that's got more to play for, essentially than you do in this one? I think it's going to be a fascinating look into sort of the psyche of this team and how they're doing. We already saw the Falcons sort of do a light practice day on Wednesday, which I think some people might be questioning. But we'll see how this plays out. Falcons could be getting some guys back. The Saints looking pretty beat up in terms of the injury report. So we'll take a look at that first before we get into the offense and defense and how those match up against New Orleans. Before we dive in fully, guys, I want to bring you a quick word from our sponsor. It's BetOnline, folks. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to even bet on the games while they're happening. And they've got the largest selection of odds. They've got everything. They got football, NBA, college basketball getting going, NHL getting going, UFC, MMA. They've got it all, guys. The Falcons, I believe, are 4-point road favorites right now, implying this is approximately a 6.5 point spread on a neutral field. So this could be a spot if you're thinking the Falcons could lay it to the Saints. You bet on that. But I know these two teams pretty well, and I know the Falcons play 1-score games, so I'm probably not touching that spread. But this could be an opportunity if you have a lot of belief in the Falcons to get some money on this team. But no matter what you want to bet on, folks, head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. That's betonline.ag. And when you sign up, be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, let's take a look at the injury report for both teams. We only have Wednesdays. I'm still waiting to see it here on Thursday. If I get it while we're recording, I will let you guys know. But so far, Atlanta looking pretty good so far. The only player, so as I'm saying this, the injury report is coming in. So they are on time, thankfully, because I try to record this after 4 on Thursday so I can get 2 days of injury reports for you guys. So it is here on time, so I can give you 2 days worth of injury reports. So, and today on Thursday is a full practice for Atlanta. On Wednesday, like I said, it was just a walkthrough. So good news today, Matthew Judon upgraded from DNP to full. He was dealing with an illness. Who knows exactly what that means, but he was back to full participation today, so no concerns there. Second straight day of full participation for both linebacker Troy Anderson and center Drew Dahlman. Anderson has said he will play this week. He's confident in that, so that's great. We Falcons haven't had him since the last time they played the Saints way back in Week 4. He ended up getting hurt on special teams at the end of the game after having the game of his career. Hopefully he can repeat the game of his career part, not the injury report this week. And it does look like that we're tracking right now to get Drew Dahlman back in the lineup for Atlanta. That could be a big boost to the run game. Falcons are definitely going to want to try to pound the rock on the Saints defense if possible. I think that just makes their whole offense more consistent when they're able to do that. Maybe help close out some of these games that they've been giving up some late touchdowns and maybe get a multiple score win, here. But those are the 3 guys that are full. Still limited are Drake London, Grady Jarrett, and Chris Lindstrom. James Smith-Williams still limited, and Kyle Pitts limited with a hamstring as well. The only DNP is J.D. Bertrand, who's still not practicing with a concussion. So his status for this week definitely in doubt at this point, I would say. Not expecting Bertrand to suit up. So obviously that's a good looking injury report for the Falcons, especially given that we could see some of these guys getting back in this lineup. So excited to see if these guys can return. Obviously, Troy Anderson might be the most important one of this group. He's kind of the speed in the middle of their defense that they're just so lacking right now. And I think it's really great to be able to possibly get Drew Dahlman back, get Troy Anderson back. It looks like Falcons aren't going to be missing Drake London potentially, or Grady Jarrett just a couple days after this team, I think, was pretty worried about these guys not being able to participate. So, happy to see that could change and maybe these guys will be able to play if needed. At this point, we will see how that shakes out on Friday. So keep monitoring the injury report. But so far, things trending up for the Falcons. For the Saints, I don't have a full injury report for New Orleans yet. But there are 4 players, I think, obviously, that are going to be concerns for New Orleans. Right now, right off the bat, the Saints had 4 players that did not participate in practice. Cedric Wilson Jr., the wide receiver, Kool-Aid McKinstry at corner, Chris Olave with that just scary concussion that he suffered during the last game, and then Lucas Patrick, who is the starting, I believe, left guard for the Saints right now. Those guys were all DNP, and so far it looks like all of them were not at practice on Thursday. That's not official yet, but they were not seen during the open portion of practice. So that implies that all 4 of those guys not practicing probably portends that those guys are likely to miss Sunday's game. Obviously, Olave almost certainly is not going to play, given how scary that concussion was. I think they're probably going to take their time evaluating him. Cedric Wilson Jr. as well with that shoulder injury. So that's already 2 more receivers down for a Saints team that's just down so many receivers already. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the Saints were going to be depending on him, considering that they traded away Marshawn Lattimore. He looks like it's unlikely to play. And then Lucas Patrick, who's actually been a really nice player for the Saints this year. He's their best offensive lineman per PFF right now. Obviously, we'll see if Eric McCoy is able to return anytime soon. I believe technically he would be eligible to return this week. I'm not sure if he's back practicing yet or not, but at this stage, Lucas Patrick is down. That would obviously be a big loss for them. He's been their most consistent player on that offensive line. So that's definitely one to monitor as well. And then a lot of guys limited, but I don't think any of these guys are potentially missing the game. Kamara was full with a hand injury. They have some guys that are full with some stuff. Derek Carr had an illness, but he was a full participant as well. So right now, it doesn't look like any of the rest of these players, unless something changes drastically between now and Sunday, are going to miss. So it's just the four that I mentioned, the two receivers in Wilson and Olave, Khalid McKinstry at cornerback, and then Lucas Patrick at guard are the ones to watch there. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to take a look at how the Falcons offense can attack this New Orleans Saints defense. All right, so lots changed for these two teams since the last time they played, right? Atlanta's offense going into week 4 was pretty underwhelming. A lot of trouble with converting third downs. I believe at the time they were like the NFL's worst third down offense. The passing game had shown some flashes, especially late in that Eagles game, but it was very inconsistent. The run game was actually the one strength that they had, and they were coming off losing both Drew Dahlman and Caleb McGarry at the end of that, or in the middle of that Chiefs game in week 3. So the Falcons are actually a very different looking team now, in that they've got McGarry back. They could have Dahlman back as well. The whole offense has really clicked a lot better than it had before. The passing game is one of the NFL's best at this point. I believe they're, according to PFF, Atlanta's offense is actually 4th in the NFL in overall grade, if you put a lot of stock in PFF grades. And the run game has really become a lot more diverse, and they've had more success running inside. Really, the Falcons offense looks completely different, and just Cousins looks a lot more comfortable, and this team has just played a lot better in general. And we've seen now a pretty clear trend that this Falcons offense just wrecks shop against the NFC South. They've been by far better against all their NFC South opponents than they have against anyone else. Cowboys, I guess, notwithstanding, they had a great game there. And we've seen this Saints defense just not really perform the way you would expect. New Orleans obviously is missing guys. They just lost their best DB, arguably, in Marshawn Lattimore. And this team just hasn't really had the teeth on defense that they're used to having. And at this stage, you could definitely say that Atlanta's got the advantage here. New Orleans, not necessarily a terrible overall defense, but they're down all the way at 26th in terms of points allowed at this point. It's a big change from where this team has been in the past. They're also 28th in yardage allowed. Yards per play, they're last in the league with 6 yards per play allowed. And they've actually been one of the worst teams against the pass, 27th in passing yardage allowed, and net yards per attempt a little bit better at 24th. And they've also been bad against the run. They're 25th in overall rushing yards allowed, but if you take it to yards per carry allowed, they are 31st behind, ahead of only the New York Giants. So really, the Falcons can find ways to attack the Saints defense pretty much anywhere. I think Atlanta's going to try to lean more on the run, just because I especially if Drake London has to miss time in this game. I think they'll try to lean more on the run game and just really try to unleash the play action when they can. But this Saints team right now is also just reeling in the secondary. I think their safety group of Tyrann Mathieu and, Jordan Howden, who I don't know who that is. I guess it's their 5th round pick. I think he's been playing like fairly well, so good for him. He started the last 4 games, it looks like, so good for him. Looks like he's rounding into form and turning into someone who's a solid option for them. Tyrann Mathieu, not having his best year, but at corner, they're just so depleted. Paulson Adebo on IR. The Saints also down, obviously, Khalid McKinstry, who was a DNP the last 2 days at practice. Seems unlikely that he's going to play. So really, and like we said, Marshall Lattimore just got shipped out. So Alontae Taylor's the only guy they really have right now, and he was their slot corner. He's had to move outside, and that's not been a good change for him. He has a 41 coverage grade. He's given up a lot in the passing game. He is a good run defender, and he is a good pass rushing cornerback still, but because they've had to rely on him playing outside corner, he doesn't get the favorable looks he was getting earlier in the season as a pass rusher. That also means the Saints have basically had to go to some deep depth players at this point to sort of fill out their other corner spots in Ugo Amadi and Rico Payton, Shamar Jean Charles, guys that haven't really gotten a lot of run, have played like a handful of snaps. So this team is very thin in the secondary. Obviously the Falcons are probably going to go out there in as much nickel as they can to get as many of these depth corners on the field as possible. And that's not going to portend good things for New Orleans for the most part. But you keep looking at the rest of this team, and it's just it doesn't really get any better when you go to the inside. They do still have Demario Davis, who actually missed the Falcons game last year. I think that's the first time he's missed a Falcons game with the Saints. He's obviously still good. I don't think he's having the season that you would hope for. He's still a good linebacker, definitely a quality player, but not the dominant guy he was even, I would say, last year. Still a good player though, so you don't never want to overlook him. Pete Werner is back in the lineup as well. Again, having a solid overall season, but not really reaching the heights that he has in the past for this team. The issues, I think, really come up front where the Saints do have Carl Granderson, who I think has been like just a bright spot for that defensive line. Chase Young has kind of been disappointing. Cam Jordan, it seems like, at long last, the ageless Cam Jordan now in the midst of his age 35 season, he doesn't really have much anymore. It's not going well for him. And then Brian Brzee, last year's first round selection with the 30th pick, or 2023's first round selection, he has been a huge liability for them. And they just don't really have many good options. Other than that, Kalen Saunders has been kind of underwhelming. He's been okay. Nathan Shepard against the run has been a disaster. This team overall, they just have depth issues, and their starters aren't exactly lighting it up either. So the Falcons are getting their offensive line back healthy in this one, and they, get Drew Dahlman back in there. Bijan Robinson's kind of coming into what looks like a great second season. It's really just pick your poison for the Falcons. I think this is probably New Orleans' biggest issue is that, even if they can find some success against the Falcons defense, which, we know has its share of issues, the Falcons offense probably can outduel this New Orleans Saints offense. And one of the big reasons is that this defense is just a liability for them. So, we'll see how much success the Falcons have. It's obviously the fans are going to be back in it in New Orleans. The team is going to be invested because they are out from under the yoke of Dennis Allen, who apparently was just a horrible head coach. I mean, I could have told you that, but they're going to be giving it their all. So the Falcons aren't going to have an easy time here, but talent wise, the Falcons should have the advantage here on offense and be able to put up points against this Saints defense. And if they can do that, I feel, if this offense is humming, I don't know that there's a lot of teams, unless they have a great offense, that will be able to keep up if Atlanta can really get going offensively. So that's going to be the hope for Atlanta, that they can do it with a versatile attack. I think they want to be a little bit more balanced, probably get the run game more and rely on that to close out games. Haven't really had the consistency there, so maybe this week will be the week we see that. All right, let's take a look at how the Falcons defense is going to match up against a New Orleans Saints offense that is getting some pieces back, but still has some pretty big issues. All right, so the Falcons defense matching up against this Saints offense. This was a matchup that I think a lot of people were really terrified of when they played back in week 4, and for good reason. The Saints had put up 40-plus points in back-to-back weeks. They had a bit of a scuffle in week 3, but at the time, people still thought this was like a resurgent Saints team that was going to defy the odds. They were going to, really like make this a 3-way battle in the NFC South, and it was going to be spicy. And, there was a lot of hype around this offense, and that hype has completely disappeared. A large part of that obviously had to do with the Saints going to Spencer Rattler because Derek Carr had to miss time with an injury, and the offense just kind of fell apart during that window. Um, but beyond that, this offense has just underperformed. It hasn't been anywhere near as good as it was those first 6 weeks. It's not the NFL's worst offense. They're definitely doing better statistically than the defense. I think they're about league average right now. They're exactly league average. They're 16th in scoring with 23 points scored, and they are 16th in yardage as well. But keep in mind, a lot of that had to do with their explosion of points over the first 2 weeks. They really haven't been able to match those numbers sort of ever since then. They've really struggled on both sides of the ball. But this team ultimately, still a solid passing offense by statistics, and also a solid rushing attack. But they're pretty just average. I mean, net yards per attempt 20. 20th in the league, yards per carry 18th. It's kind of just an average offense, and I think that kind of checks out on the field. But this team continues to lose pieces to injury, and there's no bigger spot on this team than the wide receiver room, where at this stage, New Orleans may have lost Chris Olave for the season, with that scary concussion. We'll see. He's not going to play this week, I can tell you that much. Cedric Wilson Jr., who they have had to rely on, he was basically starting for them over the last couple weeks. He has been okay, so that's nice to see, but he has not practiced this week, so he might be out of the lineup. The Saints signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He hasn't given them a whole lot, but they're going to have to lean on him as a primary target this week. Mason Tipton has kind of been like their top guy, essentially. Outside of Chris Olave, right? And they still have some decent tight ends and Juwan Johnson. They've got Taysom Hill back, so maybe that's the secret to this whole team. We know he's going to score at least one touchdown against the Falcons. But, from a passing game standpoint, this team has just really struggled. And I don't think they just don't scare you with the weapons they have out there. And that's probably going to lead to the Falcons. Maybe I would hope that the Falcons try to get a little bit more aggressive in this game with their coverage, given who they're covering out there. And sort of load up to try to stop this run game, which again has not been very efficient, but the Falcons haven't been great at stopping the run either. And the Saints, so far, I would say that their blocking has largely been better in run blocking than pass protection. That's kind of been what they want to do. That's what they want to lean on. So if the Falcons, I think it makes sense for the Falcons to really try to find a way to stop the run here. I think that's a key thing. And we talked about, can we play Eddie Goldman some more snaps? If Troy Anderson's back out there, how does that change the way they do things? But ultimately, the Saints offensive line is fine. Not like the Falcons take advantage of bad offensive lines anyway. Atlanta did have more success rushing the passer last week against Dallas, who probably has a similar quality offensive line. We just need to see consistency from Atlanta. I imagine the Falcons will, especially now that Troy Anderson's back, try to get Ellis just rushing the passer as much as possible. I think they kind of realize that he's just not really an asset in coverage. He's okay there, but they're just much better just having him rush. You're going to get much better bang for your buck by having Ellis rush on sim pressures and trying to confuse people and occasionally dropping him just to change it up. But, with Anderson back there, hopefully that means that he can take over those coverage duties and give that team some range from the linebacker spot, which is they've just really not had without him out there. So, we know Atlanta's safety group is really good. Simmons back last week was obviously a huge help that contributed to kind of that bounce back after a really rough game with Richie Grant at safety. But, opponents don't really want to throw deep on this Falcons team. They really fear the safety duo, probably rightly so. The Falcons corners have played well too. AJ Terrell, again, not having his best year. I think, he was better in the scheme last year, but he's kind of adjusting. Mike Hughes has been a really nice surprise. We'll see if the Falcons work in Clark Phillips. They have been trying to use him some. And D. Alford last week I thought was a really nice change up where they let D. Alford play more man coverage. They just kind of had him man up against the slot, play closer to the line of scrimmage. I think he benefited from that. And that was a tough matchup against CeeDee Lamb. I thought he played that pretty well, as well as you could expect given the opponent. So I wonder if the Falcons try to do that as well. and try to mix it up with their coverages and try to take advantage, of the lack of weapons the Saints have. Try to muddy the waters and see if they can get Carr to throw some picks and put this game away by taking advantage of those. And really, I think it's going to come down to, like it does every week, can this Falcons front do anything? Can they impact the game? Can they stop the run? Can they get any pressure? Can the interior just come to life? It really has been just very disappointing how this interior looks given expectations. Arnold Ebiketie has been the one bright spot on that defensive line. So it seems like they're just going to give him as many snaps as he can handle. That would be nice if he can continue growing there. But, we need to see what the Falcons can do opposite him, because Judon has just been a non-factor for this team, and they don't really have a lot of other intriguing options right now. We'll have to see how they do it. But, I don't think this is a shutdown situation. The Saints are going to come out and be able to put up some points, but I think it's just this. If the Falcons offense can show up and do what we expect them to do, they should be able to get enough of a lead where this defense doesn't need to play perfectly. They could create a turnover, get a couple stops here and there. That might be all they need to do with this offense humming. And that obviously is going to be the hope this week, is that you could really take advantage of an undermanned Saints team. They'll be playing, above their weight, I imagine, in this game, just because how could they not? But I think, honestly, you look at this from an objective standpoint, and I think the Falcons are probably favored on both sides of the ball. Obviously, it's kind of tough to really gauge given that, Carr hasn't exactly played a ton. So we've seen it kind of half the season with Carr and half not. So where does this team lie? Probably somewhere in the middle, but without the receiving talent, you wonder how Carr is going to look out there, throwing to these guys. I'm interested to see how the Falcons play it. If they do try to get more aggressive against a team that they should theoretically match up really well against, and have the talent advantage there. So that's basically the matchups. I think the Falcons do have the advantage on both sides of the ball. I would say the intangible stuff, the fact that the Saints just fired a coach that was apparently reviled by the team, that's going to be a big emotional boost. That is something that matters. But, on the other side of the field, this is a rivalry game. This was already going to be a high energy game. The Falcons, you can't, Raheem Morris gets this rivalry. I think Arthur Smith never really embraced it. And it showed. And Raheem Morris gets it. He was here for a very long time. He's been in the NFC South before, even without the Falcons. He knows that the Saints are public enemy number one. The team doesn't like the Saints. The Saints don't like the Falcons. You gotta lean into that, get the emotions going, and be able to match New Orleans' energy in this game. I think that's the key. Really, the key to the game is can you match New Orleans' energy? They're gonna come out swinging. They're gonna give you everything they got. They're gonna unleash, I'm sure, some crazy stuff. They're gonna try using Taysom Hill all over the place. They're gonna come out and give you their best shot. This is their Super Bowl. And the Falcons have to be ready. And they have to match that energy. Come out there and put a whooping on this Saints team, which I think they're very capable of doing. This is not the same team that played New Orleans back in week 4, and this is not the same Saints team that played the Falcons back in week 4 either. They've gotten worse. So, how does this actually go down? That's much more of an open question, but I can't imagine this one being a blowout. I think it's really this Falcons team, I think they do just match up better against this Saints team, especially given how poor the Saints defense has become in over the last several weeks, basically since they last played. They've kind of really fallen off. I know they'll be inspired, but you're losing your head coach who was your de facto defensive coordinator. I mean, this defense was sloppy before. Losing that big of a presence, even if it's a net gain because you didn't like him, I don't see the Saints really fixing their defensive issues on 3 days of practice after firing Dennis Allen. But they're going to be playing with a lot of energy. This is going to be a tough game no matter what. I do think the Falcons are rightly favored here, and will probably come away with a 1-score win once again. But I would not sleep on this Saints team. This is going to be a tough game. There's no time that you go into New Orleans and expect to come away with an easy win. If you think that, you're a fool, and I don't think Raheem Morris is going to take this rivalry game lightly. I think the Falcons need to send a message to New Orleans after the way things went last year in the final rematch of these two teams. And I would absolutely love it if they could just put them down and, put up, 40 plus on them and really, do what the Saints did to Atlanta last year, just run them out of their own building, essentially. I'm not expecting that. I do think that this rivalry is almost always going to be close games. Probably some crazy stuff will happen. It seems to be pretty typical here. But the Falcons are in a better position. The Falcons are getting some of their key guys back, and it seems like they thankfully avoided major injuries to Jarrett and Drake London. And if that's the case, there's not really any like paper reasons that this Falcons team would not be favored in this game, but you can't discount, the fired coach bump, the energy level. The Falcons need to match that energy and go in there with the ability to play up to what the Saints are going to be dishing out. This is going to be a tough game. And I think the Falcons just need to weather the storm, especially early. Saints are going to throw a lot at them. They're probably going to make some changes and do some stuff differently, but I don't think they're not going to be able to just roll out a whole new scheme or do anything like that. It's only been a couple days since Dennis Allen was fired. It's going to be more of an energy level thing, more of an intangibles thing. If the Falcons can match New Orleans' energy early, I think they can probably put this team away in the second half relatively comfortably if things go well. If Cousins has one of those games where he's just throwing picks and he's off, then all bets are off, right? And maybe that's where the run game comes in. You can lean more on that this week. But yeah, guys, thanks for joining us here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We preview Falcons versus Saints. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you want to support the show, you can check out patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, or if you're more of a video enjoyer, you can sign up for the YouTube channel membership. They both get you access to some early shows like this one, some ad-limited stuff as well, and some ad-free stuff, as well as when we do our Q&A sessions, when we do our fantasy leagues, all that stuff, you get access to that too. Make sure to check out, of course, thefalcoholic.com for that terrific written content. But in the meantime, guys, we will be back on Sunday to break down Falcons versus Saints Week 10 rematch on our post-game show on the Falcoholic Live. We will see you after that game, hopefully for a celebration of a takedown as the Falcons end New Orleans season this week, hopefully. But, we'll have to see how it goes. I still don't fully trust this team. I'm getting closer, but it's still tough to fully believe in this team, especially given the off the field stuff going on this week. So we'll see how it goes. Best of luck to the Falcons. Have a great week, guys. Thanks for joining us here. We'll see you next time.